why don't we just start out, Greg, if you don't mind just giving a little bit of a background to yourself, and then I'd love to get into some of the questions that I've got pre-prepared for you.
Sure, sure. I started out doing in-house learning with BP oil and gas a number of years ago, um, and it was very much traditional, just getting into it, basically just knocking briefs out. And then after a very short amount of time, started to think a bit more about what are we doing, why are we doing it, is there a benefit, is there a link to the technology we're using in-house to what we could be using, or what we do use external. Looking to more around kind of experience design. That's where it kind of started moving beyond kind of traditional learning design thinking and instructional design. So I think more about how can you garner an emotion from what we're doing rather than just we've shown you something, so surely you've learned it now. And then that became much more over the years into more thinking about product design. So thinking about how product design works with, and including things like service design, whether it's things like an Amazon or a Netflix or a Apple, Google, all the kind of obvious big names, and how down to every little thing we use has been thought about by someone somewhere. And the target market isn't just, well, it's there so you'll use it. They're one of many saying, well, we've made something. It's up to you, the audience, to then find out the reason why you would like this, the reason you're going to get it, and the actual benefit you're going to see from it. And obviously, the best things float to the top, and those that don't really have a purpose or aren't as good or haven't been well thought out kind of float to the bottom or sink to the bottom even. And that's pretty much where I kind of went through a number of different industries, so banking, tobacco, FMCG, that kind of stuff, all the big ones, and then kind of came out this side, and yeah, I've now started two circles, and it's we're trying to focus on that kind of intersection of product design and learning design, where the two kind of meet together. And it's crazy that that's not really something that is used as much as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to get into that. And you're going to have to dumb some of this down because I'm definitely not in your space, and would really love to understand it. So, out of the company, so you said you went through a whole bunch of different industries. You were always working. What was the department that you're working within called? Is it the learning and development department, or is it within design, or what does that look like in practice?
No, it was always either a learning design team or like an HR function or a capability skill building kind of team. They all kind of have different names depending on where you're going, but kind of learning seems to be the kind of catch-all term for them.
And that's just around training and upskilling internal stakeholders, basically. That's the core function of that department.
Yeah, so it's basically, so you might have them broken down into functions where they look at, purely for finance or IT or whatever it's going to be. Then you also look at things like leadership and things that are more kind of soft and hard skills rather than functionally specific. I think the process remains the same. Or the approach remains the same. Sorry, and that is if you're just making something and assuming somebody will use it, it seems kind of crazy. We live in a world where there's next day this, immediate that, endless amounts of choice. Just because you've made something and you've told a handful of people doesn't mean it's gonna kind of take off. So having that product design mindset is huge. It's a huge shift.
So, what did you learn about how to develop and launch learning products from working in these companies? How do you make that process successful? How do you get people to actually consume it and actually take action on things?
The best way to explain it is that it's almost trial and error. So having been doing this for a number of years, the first few times is literally being that person of, well, I've made a thing, I've put the thing out. Why is nobody using it? And then once you start to get into kind of beyond that kind of instructional design, which isn't a bad term, it's just maybe been kind of bastardized a little bit. Then when you get into more things like experience design, you start to think a bit more holistically around not just the product you've made, but the environment it sits in, the people that sits within, or the environment those people sit within, and then all the other things that come into them. So what else is taking up their time, their attention, their interest? What other opportunities are kicking around for them? Once you get into that, and then you start to think about all of that from a product design mindset, you kind of fast forward from, well, I've made something, why isn't it working, to I know exactly why I've made something and why I've made this particular item or product or service, and then why that's going to be useful, not useful, and then you can start to tweak very specific parts of it. So I almost kind of take it back to if someone just said, "My car's not working," you go, "Great, what's wrong?" They go, "Don't know, it's just not working." And then you could sit and tinker with every single screw and nut and bolt and move things around. Or you could be a really skilled mechanic and go, "I know exactly why your car's not working. It's this thing over here," and you fix that one thing. So it's trying to target the areas that are not working. It's not always the whole thing.
And would you say that you only really learn that from experience, having gone through the process many, many times? That's how you learn which part of the learning design process is faulty.
Yeah, I would say so. It's a mixture of having made lots of programs and products and services previously, as well as trying to hone down what are the things that should always or could always be the same. So where do you need to kind of front load your process with information so you can actually speed up later on? And it's not necessarily one size fits all, but you kind of take that methodology, that approach, and you kind of learn from experience of making things that work really well, also measuring why they worked really well. So not just they're kind of referred to as happy sheets. People going, "Yeah, it was great, I loved it." But again, there's things that maybe we don't always love, but they're really good for us. So it's taking that approach all the way back to your product and making sure that what you're making, it's going to work.
What I'm hearing, what it sounds like to me, is that the success comes from not from tactics, not from design tactics or anything like that. It's much more around your strategy as a whole and being very clear on why you're making the product and the training in the first place, who it's for, how it's going to help them, and then what success looks like. And that's actually more important than any sort of design hack or tactic you can give people.
Absolutely, and the strategy that you can create or that you can follow is not reinventing the wheel every time. Once you've kind of found that mindset and you've embraced it, it's a much easier way of approaching any kind of problem, opportunity, innovation that you're trying to do within your learning to be able to move at speed. And the longer you spend trying to figure out your strategy or your process, the further away that opportunity, goal, innovation is getting away from you. And it's growing arms and legs. So, in a bad way if it's a problem, or it's kind of shrinking if it's an opportunity or an innovation. So, being able to go into most situations confidently, saying, "I know how we're going to attack this. I don't know what the outcome's going to be yet, but I know that how we're going to start working on this from day one is key."
Yes, interesting. So, how, if I'm sitting in a learning and development team at the moment, how would I know if my design process is broken or perhaps not working hard enough for me?
So there would be usually a number of things that are kind of that are factors basically. So it's a good process should be adaptive and it should be flexible. You shouldn't have to be bogging yourself down with process. You should be able to move through that quite quickly. And if you're not able to move fast, if you're finding yourself doing more admin and logistical things and actually attacking the problem, and you kind of almost, if you still get to the end of creating a solution and you don't feel like you've either done the best job you could, if you don't feel like there's any measurements at the end that you can take from that to say, this is where we started, this is where we ended, these two things are very different now, and I know I've achieved that goal, then it's likely going to be a symptom of a kind of a struggling process rather than as many as other things, as well as other things even. Sorry, but it's not always the people. Sometimes the process can hamper even the best designers.
And what are some of the sort of challenges or pain points that people have when their process isn't perhaps optimized or working hard enough for them? What does that lead to?
Challenges and pain points. It's usually going to be things like they are spending too much time, resource, working with a third party who aren't bad things to work with, but maybe the wrong type of third party, or they're giving unclear guidance. And it's basically just lack of direction. If you don't have a clear direction from the very beginning, you could that train has left the station and it could go one of 50 ways. Whereas ideally, you want to kind of start to narrow it down as quickly as possible so you can get to where you want to get to efficiently. And even if you get there and it's not exactly where you want to be, you are way closer than if you didn't have a clear direction at the start. So, time and resource and money in three things that you would struggle with, um, then you can start to knock out at least two of those immediately by just having some clear direction up front before you start to kind of spend your time on it. Yeah, I think those are the main things that people struggle with.
And does it tend to lead to maybe inconsistent processes if you don't have that clarity and that structure? Does it mean that the output is inconsistent?
Yeah, sure. I think if you look at any kind of major brand, whether they are a technology or a learning or a industry brand of any industry almost, they all, a good brand is recognizable from 100 yards, 200 yards away. You can touch or experience or feel their service, and the quality because you've either used it before or it's what you're expecting. So when we're creating learning products, if people don't have that emotional connection to their products, or it's not coming out of their product, sorry, then it's any inconsistency is going to be, it's where there's always a competitor somewhere nearby. There's always someone else or something else that's either willing to take your time, your attention, or your business. And your business is going to be your customers. So when we talk about the learners, we should be just referring to them as customers or the audience. How can you best serve those customers? How can you best serve that audience? Because they have options, and they will use those options. So trying to keep a retained audience is the best thing.
And just for clarity, so when you say audience or customer, we're talking about the internal stakeholders within your business that are learning from your products.
Yeah. So I would say it's absolutely, so it's any employees that you're trying to affect in some way, whether it's upskill, leadership training, skills, behavior training, culture shift, all those kind of things that you'd like to do, even knowledge transfer. It could be a mixture of those things, but it's basically people that work for your company that you're trying to affect.
Yeah, I find that interesting in itself. I mean, obviously, I'm not really from this world, but that's quite an interesting shift, I would imagine, rather than saying, how do I get my colleagues to consume this learning product? It's really interesting to hear you talk about, no, you have to think about almost selling it to them as a customer. And yes, they're within your business, but they're still your customers and the people that you're serving.
Yes, absolutely. So they your your audience are still people. Your customers are still people. If you think about again from a product design mindset, your a product is being advertised to a market or it's been targeted at a market. So might be some products that are more widely marketable. So the obvious one is food. You can market that to many people. Then as soon as you start getting to things like alcohol, it's obviously an age range. And if you look at things like clothing or vehicles, obviously you have different targets within that. So with learning products, it's whilst you have a captive audience, as in they all work at the same company, it doesn't mean that's just half the job is done for you. As you know who they are, you know where they are, you know what channels they might be available on. But trying to get their attention because they've also got their phone, they've got the internet, they've got many other things that happen around them. You need to be able to say, this is something that I recognize is happening for you or is of benefit to you. This is how we can help you. And your product needs to service those things immediately, or it needs to be perceived as immediately obvious why it helps them. If you can't get those things across, then it's either your comms, your product, or the way you're trying to affect that change for them, whether it's an upskill or anything else like that at all.
Hmm. It's really interesting. I mean, it sounds almost like going on a go to market marketing campaign, but you're just doing it internally and it's getting really clear on what's the communication strategy here. Is the product good enough? Is it actually delivering what we say it's going to deliver, and so on? So it's almost like a mini launch strategy within a company.
Absolutely, and it's also making sure that even if your messaging is really clear, that's great. But if the product doesn't have clear purpose, as in you don't fully understand the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you're trying to give to somebody or trying to offer to somebody, then why would that resonate with them? You know, for all they're aware, it's just another product that is maybe great, but it's great for somebody else. It's not great for them. And you need to try and make sure that every product you create, when you put it in front of the right people or the audience or the market that you're trying to get to, if it's for them, they need to immediately feel that connection. So that comes down to your product design mindset and the way that you not just build it, but the way you think about it and plan for it out front, and the research you do that all goes into that to ultimately come up with an end to end process that gives you a kind of a great product to kick off your product life cycle.
Mm. And I guess these kinds of things can have huge impacts on organizations. Like if you can improve the rate of learning at an organization, then that has a massive impact in terms of the success of that organization, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the one of the best things I saw, and I'm sure there's lots of learning people that have seen this. So it's like a three-panel cartoon of two people sat there saying it's too expensive to train our staff. What if we pay for them to train and they all leave? And the other person responds with saying, "Well, what if we don't?" I'm sure it's better worded than that, but basically it's that kind of thing of your people, your most valuable asset. They're the ones getting the work done, doing the things you need them to do. So whilst there is AI, there is an advance in technology. We're not at a point where we're a self-sustaining species. People have a lot to do and a lot to offer. The world moves very, very fast, and skills change very quickly, needs change very quickly. But learning design still seems to be kind of in second gear when it kind of needs to. Whatever the thing is in Star Wars, where they just go really quick. That's what they need. They need to just go. That's the one. They need to just go crazy fast because, but with purpose, not just aimlessly kind of going off wherever they fancy.
Hyperspeed or something, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. And you talk about speed quite a lot as a metric of success. What are the other metrics that you would look at?
So speed is something that is from experience of working with some of the kind of bigger companies is definitely something that's lacking. But I think having clear direction, so you could very easily just start to move at pace. Um, but with that, if you don't have clear direction, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to skip certain key steps of things in the process that would ultimately create a great product. So there are times to know. It's almost a little bit of self awareness to know when do I slow down, when do I speed up, how much is enough, and but ultimately your kind of north star, your kind of your compass is always should be pointing at what are we trying to do, who for, and is anything I'm doing right now, is that attacking that or is that helping that? If it isn't, it's probably something I shouldn't be doing right now. Or it's probably something I can do a bit later. Right now, there's probably something else more important. And I think just trying to focus people on that mindset of think about great products you've used, think about great services you've used, why you think they're great, why you loved them, why you still use them, why you would use them again. Chances are they probably used a product design mindset, or had a group of product designers or product engineers. It wasn't a couple of guys sitting around going, "Oh, this is a great idea," and then just came up with it and did it straight away. So yeah, good design shows.
Yes, totally agree. So talk to me about the benefits of that sort of product design focused process within the learning space.
Sure. So a good process for learning product design is basically you would look at traditional learning models, but then you would also start to think about the best bits of the more advanced or the more kind of outside of learning methodologies. So you would look at things like Scrum, you would look at things like 5DI and just general product design specifics in general. And you would start to think about how does that all apply to learning. So you would start your thinking, sorry, with the problem. So you would start to think about, you have your ultimate problem, you start to break that down into almost a family tree, because you're not attacking one problem, you're probably attacking a collection of different things. So by attacking those collection of different things, you're chipping away at the main goal. Um, your product will need to be many things to many people. Um, you're not the only person it's going to be used for. So again, a big thing for product design focusing for a product design focused process is removing your ego, removing yourself from almost thinking about yourself as the customer. So whilst you're the designer and you might naturally be somebody that this could be aimed at, you're not designing it for you. You're designing it for an audience. You're designing it for a go-to-market strategy. Um, and that's great. If you say, I'd give my money up for it, I'd give my time up for it, that's brilliant. But you're one person and you want it to be successful across multiple people. That's where you gather your data from. And that's where you can start to think about, what am I actually measuring? So not just the end goal being solved, but the bits that have made up that end goal. And that's where you can start to tweak your product and you can start to iterate. So, the obvious example is an iPhone. They're not still an iPhone 1. They've kind of iterated, they've moved with the times, they've tried to change things, make little improvements. I think they're doing pretty well. So I think there's a lot we could learn from people with product design mindsets.
Completely agree. Although it does seem like sometimes the changes are minimal, but they just yeah, just want to sell you a new phone. But no, I get you, and I think what's really interesting about you guys is you've got that sort of product design focused process, but I think you've got your own spin on it as well, and kind of your own sort of protocol within that. I won't ask you to break the whole thing down. I'm sure that people can find a full breakdown somewhere on your website or on your LinkedIn or whatever. But I'd be curious as to like what some of the successes have been working in this way, and what are some of the case studies. Don't have to mention companies, but what are some of the case studies of working in this way and the kind of impact it's had?
Sure. So again, with across a multitude of different companies that we've worked with, we have seen the average, and this is ballpark, kind of time for a program creation is anywhere between kind of 3 to 4 months at the earliest stage, all the way up to kind of 9 to 12 months. And sometimes those kind of 3 months and those 12 month programs are the same thing. Some would just take three, some take 12. What we've been trying to do is again thinking about speed, but also thinking about clear direction. Is how do you get the best of both? By and how can we do that by walking people through a process? So with the process we've created, it basically covers everything in a particular order. So we make sure that we run our protocol in a very specific order. We make sure that we speak to select people at different times. So it's not a case of this is our project team and they walk through every single step together. Everyone's kept updated, but you can move a lot faster with fewer people. And there's some points you can't move past without certain people. So you bring those people in, you drop them off, and you pick them back up again as and when you need them. But everyone is connected. By doing that, it means you can move much quicker at to your end goal. You can release a product. You can trial it with real life people in a real world scenario, because otherwise you're just guessing. Um, and once you have that information, and once you have a great product, or what you think is a great product, and you've had it validated, that's only the first step. So it's not a case of we can all celebrate this product's released and are we all clever? It's just a case of our product's released for the first time. So that's when you start to look at either retracting it, making some edits, or releasing updated versions or add-ons, because you're continuously looking at your metrics, you're continually looking at measurements, and all of that would come from the very, very beginning of your process. And you bring the right people in for the right reasons. So if for any reason you drop somebody off in that process and you don't pick them back up again, it's purely because they've served a purpose. And it's not a personal thing. It's more of a, you were needed, you helped us out, that's great, but we don't want to waste your time anymore. But also we need to carry on moving because we've got a greater purpose than just ourselves on this product. It's the product. So the product is the master of all of us. And if it doesn't succeed, then neither do we. So that's how we measure our success.
Good. And the biggest impact would be from this process would be shortening that time. So you said it takes from 3 to 12 months. Like, and now how quickly are people delivering those programs now?
Yeah, so we're going between anywhere between kind of 7 and 10 weeks. So you go from the beginning of I have a problem, or there's an opportunity I've seen, or I'd like to innovate or refresh or change something. So from that starting point through to here is a validated product, or the kind of first full version of a validated product is about 7 to 10 weeks. So, and we've done this a few times now. So we've
Wow.
I can't remember what version of the process we're on, but it's that's also gone through its own iterations where we've made sure that what we again thought on paper was a great idea. Um, you've got to try it out. You've got to see what works and then make the changes. So we're we're running our own process on itself.
100%. Love that. Okay, good. I'd like to talk a little bit about skills-based organizations. I feel like this is quite a hot topic within the learning space. Um, so, what do you think of them in general? What are your thoughts on skills-based organizations?
So I feel like this is a term that's only been coming out in the last kind of 12 months or so, maybe 24 months. But skills have never not been a priority for any company. People are hired based on skills and experience, and the two things kind of go hand in hand. And whilst you can train or build a skill, you can't necessarily train experience. You kind of gather experience as you go through. The main things for me in terms of skills based organizations are, and especially in corporate or professional learning, is you can group these things as skills, behaviors, and facts and knowledge in those three groups. If you don't have one of those three things, again, the other two will start to suffer. So when we talk about skills based organizations, it's great to start to think about skills, not roles, as in what skills does an individual need to be able to do this type of activity or to be moved into this particular department. But again, if they don't have the behaviors or the facts and knowledge that is required to support that skill, or they don't have the skill to support that behavior or the facts and knowledge to support, it's all kind of a continuous circle of everything supporting each other. It can't work. So I think they're fantastic ideas to be a more lean and flexible organization. But you need to have that kind of that that group of three needs to be considered. It's not just a skills mapping exercise. It goes way beyond that. So um, it can be very top down, but you kind of need to get your employees to buy in. Otherwise, yeah, then you haven't got anyone to. There's no point training skills if there's no one there to train them to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, tell me. So, so how can these companies get the most out of their external vendors? What would the advice be that you would give to those people?
So I'd say that external vendors are not an enemy in any way, or they're not a bad thing to have. If anything, they're sometimes more cost effective than having permanent employees or intact teams. But again, we're talking about services, products, vendors. This all falls into the same mindset that do you feel like you're getting your money's worth? Was it worth it? Would you work with them again? If at any point the answer is no, then chances are you're either working with the wrong vendor. You don't have the clear direction that you should have set out before you engage with the vendor, or you're not really looking to a clear goal. So one or the other, somewhere there's a disconnect. And I think if you think about those products and services that are external to your company, you're looking to be entertained, upskilled, delivered to some sort of emotional connection and output. And if all you've got is kind of marginal disappointment or a kind of it's fine, then it's not going to work. So I think making it a partnership definitely is a shift from just I'm paying so you'll deliver. You've hired them for their skills and experience, so partner with them, get the best out of them, and they'll get the best out of you. And I think by having that kind of clear partnership, it just makes it so much easier to focus on again the product, the reason you're there, the reason you're teaming up. Um, and again, it just goes back to that kind of leaving your ego at the door from both sides of no one is greater than the product. It's the end goal we're all going for.
Love that. And what are the benefits to the company of using a third party vendor, an external vendor?
I think there are many. I think there's definitely in some cases it's you're getting a broader range of skills and expertise than you would in house. So I remember someone explained to me once that they had a great internal team, but they still used external providers because it was a diversity of thought, and it was a chance to look at a company that works with multiple other entities rather than just kind of honing in on their own. And sometimes it is just a time and speed thing, and I think it's healthy to use vendors for, like I say, diversity of thought, looking for different ways to achieve the same goal. And sometimes it is ultimately just down to facts and figures. It's cheaper, it's quicker, they've got more resource, they can throw more weight behind it. But again, I think the ultimate thing is still choosing the right vendor, having the right clear direction, partnership.
Love it. Awesome. That was really fun. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. Your debut, podcast debut.
Cool, thank you. Yes, yeah.